All right, let's just jump right into it. Welcome to the ultimate explainer on a guy who literally broke the boundaries of the ancient world. We are talking about a kid from Macedonia who, against all conceivable odds, built the absolute largest empire humanity had ever seen up to that point. It is a wild story, full of blinding ambition, absolute military genius, and, as you'll see, a pretty dark, tragic descent. I mean, really think about this for a second. Who actually conquers the known world before they even hit 30? It's kind of an impossible reality, right? But he actually did it. The guy never lost a single battle, not one. And his name is still echoing through history well over 2,000 years later. So let's unpack exactly how he pulled this whole thing off. Section 1. A legend is born. Prophecy, pedigree, and power. Alexander was born back in 356 BC into, well, a pretty intense family dynamic. You've got his incredibly ambitious father, King Philip II, who was busy turning Macedonia into a massive military powerhouse. But then you have his mother, Olympias. She was mysterious, fierce, and she really weaponized his destiny. Legend has it she had this dream that a literal thunderbolt struck her womb and set it on fire. And get this, on the exact day Alexander was born, the massive temple of Artemis burned to the ground. So people start whispering, right? They're saying this mighty, otherworldly force just entered the world. And honestly, it completely convinced everyone, including Alexander himself, that he was chosen by the gods. Now, if you want to build a god king, you got to get the best tutor in history, right? So King Philip hires none other than Aristotle. Yeah, that Aristotle. And Aristotle didn't just teach him how to fight. He taught the kids science, philosophy, politics. He essentially armed Alexander's mind. He gave him Homer's Iliad, which made Alexander completely idolize the mythical warrior Achilles. He carried that book absolutely everywhere. But I think the most important thing Aristotle taught him was the sheer power of vision. He learned that a true king doesn't just conquer lands, he has to rule hearts. And you know that strategic genius? It was incredibly obvious even when he was just a kid. There's this famous story where, at just 12 years old, Alexander comes across Bucephalus. This was a massive, completely untamable black stallion. While all the grown men are trying brute force to tame it and totally failing, Alexander just watches. He observes. He realizes the horse isn't mean, it's just terrified of its own shadow. So what does he do? He calmly walks over, turns the horse to face the sun so the shadow disappears, and just mounts it. Easy as that. His dad was watching all this in absolute awe, realizing right then and there that Macedonia was way too small for his son. And, probably pretty relieved he didn't have to buy another horse. All right, moving on to Section 2, Conquering the Known World, the Unstoppable Force. So fast forward to when he's 20. Things accelerate extremely fast. His father is suddenly assassinated, and Alexander violently secures the throne. The powerful city of Thebes decides to rebel. They figured, hey, he's just a kid, he's weak. Big mistake. Alexander marches down there with absolute lightning speed and literally burns the city to the ground. His whole mindset was basically, I don't wait, I win. With Greece now totally terrified into submission, he sets his sights on the massive Persian Empire. And right before crossing into enemy territory, he does something totally unthinkable. He orders his men to burn their own ships. When they freak out and ask why they're destroying their only ride home, Alexander basically says, we conquer or we die. He completely removed the option of retreat. No choice but victory. Now, I want you to keep this number in your head, 35,000. That was the size of Alexander's invasion force when he marched into Asia. In the grand scheme of ancient warfare, that's really not that big. It was a relatively small, though highly disciplined army. Okay, now contrast that with 250,000. That was the overwhelming, massive force commanded by the Persian king Darius III, just waiting to crush him. The odds were, quite literally, completely stacked against the young Macedonian. But Alexander defies those odds, and he does it at a breathtaking pace. Just think about this timeline. By 331 BC, at the Battle of Gaugamela, he pulls off this brilliant tactical maneuver to completely break the massive Persian lines. He sends King Darius literally running for his life and claims the entire Persian Empire. Boom! Then he keeps going. By 326 BC, he's pushed all the way into India, literally fighting war elephants at the Hydaspes River. And by 323 BC, he is making his triumphant return to Babylon. It's just unbelievable speed. But here's where things take a dark turn. Section 3, The Price of Power. Paranoia and the Descent. You see, the sheer stress of trying to manage this globally expanding empire really started to poison Alexander's mind. He had this vision to unite the East and the West, which, sounds incredibly visionary to us today, but to his fiercely loyal, old-school Macedonian soldiers, it felt like total betrayal. He starts wearing traditional Persian royal robes, he marries a Persian princess named Roxana, and the biggest shocker, he demands proskynos. That's the Persian custom of literally bowing face down before the king. His men were absolutely disgusted. To them, he was turning into the exact enemy they had just spent years fighting. And this cultural friction, it hits a boiling point in the most tragic way possible. Clitus the Black was one of Alexander's oldest, closest friends. The guy had literally chopped off an enemy's arm to save Alexander's life in battle, but one night, during a heavily drunken argument where Clitus was criticizing all these new Persian customs, Alexander completely loses it. He flies into a blind rage, grabs a spear, and drives it right through his friend. It was an absolutely terrifying turning point for his sanity. After that, the paranoia just deepened. When a plot to assassinate Alexander was uncovered, he didn't just execute the main conspirators. Oh no, he ordered the execution of his most loyal veteran general Parmenion, and Parmenion's son Philotas. And the crazy part, there wasn't even any solid proof that they were involved. The legendary brotherhood-driven leader who used to fight shoulder to shoulder with his men was gone. Now he was ruling them through absolute sheer fear. And then you have to drop this incredibly heavy number into the equation, 17,000 miles. That is how far his undefeated army had marched. 17,000 miles on foot. They had battled across scorching deserts, freezing mountains, raging rivers for years. And the sheer exhaustion finally broke them when they reached India. They flat out refused to go a single step further. They mutinied. So ironically, the very first time Alexander faced a true defeat, it wasn't from some massive enemy army, it was from his own exhausted men. Which brings us to Section 4, the Empire Divided. The Fall of a God. Forced to turn back, Alexander makes his way to Babylon, but he is a completely changed, weakened man. He was finding out the hard way that the logistical nightmare of actually ruling a vast, mixed-culture empire was way, way harder than just conquering it with a sword. Then, suddenly, at just 32 years old, a mysterious fever strikes him down. As he's lying there on his deathbed, barely able to speak, his top generals lean in close. They desperately need to know who should inherit this massive empire. And his cryptic, chaotic, final whisper was just, "To the strongest." I mean, wow. Those three little words instantly doomed everything he built. Because he didn't name a clear successor, his whole dream of a united world shattered immediately. It triggered decades of brutal, bloody civil war among his top generals, a group known as the Diadochi. The empire got carved up like a pie. Ptolemy grabs Egypt, Seleucus takes Persia, Antigonus claims Greece, and Lysimachus takes Thrace. Literally the greatest empire on earth was completely dismantled by the ambitions of the men he left behind. Finally, Section 5, Hero, Villain, and Legacy, the Shadow of Greatness. When we sit back and weigh the monumental impact Alexander had on human civilization, we really have to look past the battlefields. We have to look at the cultural footprint he left behind. Even though his political empire completely fractured, his cultural vision actually succeeded. We call this the Hellenistic period. Because of him, Greek became the global language of trade and politics. He founded incredible cities, like Alexandria in Egypt, which basically became the intellectual capital of the entire ancient world. Massive advancements in science and math from guys like Euclid and Archimedes, along with Greek art and architecture, spread seamlessly all the way to India. It was a total cultural explosion. But, as an explainer, we have to look at this impartially. We're looking at the ultimate duality of man here. Was he the hero, the enlightened visionary who united different cultures, never lost a single battle, and actually showed deep respect for rivals like King Porus? Or was he the villain, a bloodthirsty tyrant who slaughtered thousands of innocent people, executed his own closest friends, and let this ruthless paranoia just completely consume him? It's tough. Which side of the scale really carries more weight? And adding to that whole mythos is the enduring, unsolved mystery of his sudden death in 323 BC. What actually killed him? Was it just a natural illness, like typhoid or maybe malaria? Or was he quietly poisoned by his own generals, who were terrified of his growing madness? There's even a modern theory that he had an autoimmune disease, like Guillain-Barré syndrome, that paralyzed him right before he died. Honestly, we might never know the truth, and that mystery just makes his legend even larger. But here is what we do know for sure: the absolute massive shadow he cast over the rest of history. Just picture this. Imagine being Julius Caesar, literally one of the greatest, most powerful leaders in Roman history, standing in front of a statue of Alexander the Great and just breaking down in tears because you feel like a total underachiever in comparison. It's wild. From Caesar to Napoleon, the absolute titans of history measured their entire self-worth against what Alexander accomplished. So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. He started out as just a boy with a wild dream to rule the world. And against every single odds, he did exactly that. But as his power expanded further and further outward, his control over his own mind collapsed inward. Sure, he conquered the world, but could he conquer himself? Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer, and we will catch you in the next one.